Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast. My name's Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts. And Ryan's back with me. So for the last two episodes, if you've been following, I've recorded on my own. Ryan has been down in Atlanta, where I currently am as well now. But I was up in Canmore, and we were apart for the last month. And with all of the change that's been going on in our lives, we simply didn't have the time to podcast.
Yeah, so if you were subscribed and wondering what the hell was happening, where we disappeared to, that's what was going on.
And we're back now, so.
Yeah, so you can expect us in the future to have podcast episodes every week again, blog posts up on theworldwanderers.com.
Yeah.
Stuff happening more regularly.
Yeah, and we're excited to be back, giving new content to all of you amazing listeners out there, as well as to just be talking about life and travel and everything that makes us excited and passionate.
Yeah, so if you had been listening before the summer, our plan was originally to move to Central America in the fall. But through the summer, June, July, we had a change of plans because I had an opportunity come up here in Atlanta, Georgia. America. So we, instead of moving to Central America, we moved to Southern America.
I think it's the Southern United States, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Southern U.S. And it was kind of interesting. It was one of those things where, so Ryan got back from a seminar that he felt really inspired by in the beginning of June, and then he applied for the opportunity at the end of June, and it was a 3-step interview process. 4-step interview process?
2?
Okay, 2 or 3 step. It was like quite a process, and then upon being accepted, it wasn't simply like, okay, sweet, do I take this or not? It's, this is in a different country, now I have to go about figuring out how I'm able to work here. So it was one of those things that or at least I know for me, I wasn't really telling too many people about until it became like an actual real thing that might happen. And when we sort of talked about, the pros and cons of Central America versus Atlanta, it sort of seemed that, I guess what was the difference? I guess it was just your job. It was kind of same for me because I don't have a work visa down here.
Yeah, just to reiterate, got accepted and then still really had no certainty about if it was actually going to be able to happen because I needed to go through and get a visa. So we had these two options of Atlanta or backup plan. Central America.
Or backup plan, stay in Banff National Park, which isn't too shabby.
So every way it could have developed, it would have been good. But it was still kind of weird living with this uncertainty about what was going to happen that lasted all the way until I was at the airport.
In September.
Yeah, so I applied for the visa status at the border customs people at the airport. So up until the day I was flying to the States, I didn't really know for sure if I was going to be able to go. So that was a strange experience to be living with. Oh, tomorrow I might be living in another country, but I might just be going home this afternoon.
Yeah, and it was weird for me too, because obviously, I told my work, and then we told our landlord, and people are like, oh, cool, or that we were leaving, and it's like, oh, sweet, where are you going? And it's like, well, maybe Atlanta, but maybe Central America. And it seems like two very drastically different things, and I know our landlord was like, oh, that's kind of strange. People usually figure out where they're going before they know when they're going. So it was a bit of a strange situation. And I know from driving you into the airport that obviously there was a lot of stress that day. How were you feeling? The fact that you were okay, bye little mountain town that I really like, but maybe see you in 3 hours type thing. What did that feel like?
Yeah, it was just weird.
Any other
strange experience.
Yeah. And then was it pretty surreal when you did get through the border crossing and getting to Atlanta?
Yeah, it was a big relief. And then even through the month after I got here, still kind of a bit of a surreal feeling that, oh wow, this is actually like what happened.
Yeah. Has it sort of like settled in now, or do you still?
Yeah, and now there's like occasional moments where it's like, wow, it's weird that I live in Atlanta. Because it's never something that if you had asked me in May what the odds are that I would live in Atlanta in September, I would have said zero. Like zero chance.
Yeah.
That's not even a possibility. Why would I ever be there?
Why would I ever live in Atlanta, Georgia? Yeah, and if I'm being quite honest, like, you know, there's a lot of American cities that are on my, like, list of things that I really want to see or visit. Atlanta had not made it on that list for me.
Just alienate our entire Georgia listenership.
I mean, we'll talk a lot more about, like, Georgia and Atlanta as we have more time to explore, but I'll just go ahead and say for the Atlanta, Georgia, whatever listeners, that
Atlanteans?
The Atlanteans, that it's pretty cool down here. But that's getting way, way ahead. So going to the airport, getting a visa, feeling uncertain, kind of stressful. Arriving in Atlanta and feeling like it was super surreal. Like, I mean, you moved from Penticton to Calgary for school, so that was like, you know, a decent move for 17, 18-year-olds. But, like, this is, you know, it's a 4,000 kilometer move. Like, what was it like to get here by yourself and kind of just, like, start a job and need to, like, set up a life here?
I think traveling, especially doing the trip I had to Central Europe this past year, really, like, prepared me for a move like that. It was just kind of like, oh, you know, this is what's happening. Which doesn't really describe it super well, but it's like we've done so much traveling that being in a new city and figuring out, you know, where to stay and how to get places, like that's so familiar. Mm-hmm. And finding new things to do, it's familiar. Being by myself is familiar.
Yeah.
Having to rely on myself to set things up. Something that was kind of new for me and I'm happy I went through was kind of setting up a stable life for myself. I had gone through traveling by myself and coordinating my life, but we've lived together for a while, so in terms of finding apartments and other things, I've never really like done that all by myself.
Yeah.
So that's like nice lesson to learn that you can make it through all those things by yourself. You're completely fine.
Yeah. No, I felt that way since Ryan's working and I'm like only working remotely because I don't have a work visa down here. I spend a lot of time during the day alone. It's kind of been, I mean, I've only been here for a week, but so far I've spent quite a bit of time alone and like I was building IKEA furniture the other day and I was just like, oh man, like I've never really had to do this. Like I moved from my parents' house to a residence room where I had all my furniture to a house with roommates where my parents had a bunch of like extra furniture lying around and they basically like tossed us the scraps and then anything we did have to buy. You know, I had 4 other friends plus like a good group of guy friends down the road to help me with it. And then we basically moved that to our next apartment, sold all that when we traveled to South America, and then moved into a house in Canmore that was completely furnished. Like we bought the furniture off the previous owners. And so it was like struggling with like the bitchiest IKEA dresser ever. I was like, oh, why does this feel like so frustrating and difficult to me? It's just this like, you know, experience that I haven't really had completely like on my own. But I feel like it's really important to go through those things. Because it's like, even when you're having these like little day-to-day struggles, you can really like appreciate what you're capable of doing on your own.
Yeah, and I think it's not something you think about day to day, like this. But I think the idea of like some sort of fear of what you're capable of does kind of sit in your subconscious. Mm-hmm. That's kind of a bit vague, but what I mean by that is like when you're in your day-to-day life, working your job, doing whatever, I think sometimes you worry like, what if I got fired? What if I was out of my relationship? What if I had to move to a new city? Could I really do that? And you might, so just going through experiences like that kind of builds this sense of confidence in yourself, like a sense of self-efficacy to really be able to do whatever you encounter. And it was definitely a learning process. The day I got the apartment, I went out. I hadn't really thought about how hard it was going to be to get stuff for the apartment since I didn't have a car. Thank God for Uber, which makes it even easier than having your own car. But I cruised over to Walmart, bought myself an air mattress, and then got home. And it was like 9:30 p.m. Went to blow up the air mattress, realized that the air mattress doesn't come with batteries for its pump. So I go out, get batteries, blow up the air mattress, come back home, and realize, I didn't buy a blanket. So I have to use my sweater as a blanket the first night. One thing I found really interesting about moving, since I did fly down here, but it was moving, I just had a suitcase. So
I think a suitcase is like not even being clear.
It was a very small suitcase.
It's like a duffel bag.
But so something when we moved back from South America, well, even before that, so we were living in Calgary. We were like, okay, we're going to sell most of our stuff and go traveling, just keep a storage unit with a bit of stuff. We do that, come back from South America, we're going through our storage unit like, God, why did we keep so much of this shit? Like, we could have sold, like, so much stuff we had that we like really don't need.
Like, we sold all of our furniture. Like, it was stuff. Like, 2 sets of golf clubs and hockey skates and
things that for some reason we didn't part with.
Like 60 pairs of shoes.
But then, so over the year we lived in Canmore, we kind of accumulated things again. And at least I felt like I really want to be living more minimalistically because I feel like, or I think that it just, you have more of a sense of peace when you have less things. Mm-hmm. Things in your house that draw your attention. And if it's empty and open and not cluttered, I find it like mentally has the same effect.
Yeah.
So moving down here, I just had one small suitcase. I was here for just over a month on my own, just living out of my tiny little suitcase.
Literally exactly a month.
So I had a pair of jeans, pair of dress pants, like 4 dress shirts, a couple other shirts. That's pretty much all of it.
One pair of shoes.
I have 1 plate, 1 bowl, 1 mug. And then you just become so accustomed to that. Like, you got here with a car load of things.
Yeah, so like we sold a ton of stuff, but it's like, so I drove down here, obviously. I mean, if you didn't listen to last week's episode, you should listen to it. It's on my road trip. Pretty authentic to what was happening with me at the times as I was speaking, which is pretty cool. I just lost track of what I was saying.
You were driving down.
Yeah, so I was driving down. And to give context, like, I drive a Pontiac G6 coupe. Like, I don't have that much space in it, but at the same time, I was able to fit, 2 big Rubbermaids, a couple other small, like, bins with stuff in it, both of our backpacks, and a massive suitcase, plus a duffel bag of clothes that I was wearing.
But
the week before. So it's like, I show up, and it's just like, Ryan's like, whoa, what is all this stuff?
Yeah, so I guess relatively speaking, that's not that much stuff to have 2 people's possessions fit into a car.
A Pontiac G6.
Yeah, small amount of space in a car. But it still is this feeling after getting accustomed. It's kind of like the feeling when you come home from a long backpacking trip and you are reacquainted with all your things. And you're like, whoa, it's weird having 2 pairs of shoes. That's strange. Or like, I have so many things and I don't really need any of them.
Yeah.
So that was a weird experience when you showed up and had all this stuff. And I was like, oh, why do we have all these things? They're so unnecessary.
Yeah, and I mean, like, most of it is, like, clothing or shoes that was in there. Just, like, a few other little, like, knickknacks and stuff. I mean, I agree with you in terms of, like, being less materialistic and having less material things. And as I was packing, I was like, I know that I'm bringing too much clothing with me for, like, a few months stint in Atlanta. And I was talking to a girl at work who's also done quite a bit of backpacking. She's like, it's so crazy how you can spend so much time with just a backpack with all of your possessions in it. But then it's like on a day-to-day basis, we have, you know, so much more stuff, and we feel like we have this need for more constantly. It was kind of an interesting thing for me to think about as I was packing, because I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I might need this. Like, I don't know. I should just take this down with me. And I know that I have too much clothing down here.
Why do you think living in a more stable lifestyle makes you feel like you need more clothing, at least?
And more like stuff in general? I feel like it's sort of like, well, I feel like it's when you're traveling, you're kind of constantly on the move. And I know we've talked about this like quite a few different times on different episodes about how when you are seeing the same people kind of day after day, it feels like you should be wearing different clothing and you shouldn't just wear like the same shirt 4 days in a row. Whereas when you're traveling, it's kind of like way more acceptable to just do that. So it's kind of partly that. I mean, for me too, I know that we've purchased a little bit more stuff since I've gotten here. And the houses, it's kind of like a comfort level. Like, you know, when there's this massive change in your life, it's nice to have, you know, a couch and a lamp that lights up your room.
It's nice to have somewhere to sit.
Yeah, so to give context for me showing up here after my 4,000-kilometer road trip, I walk in and the house is just like full-on bachelor pad mode. Ryan's using an air mattress as a couch. There's like what little clothing he does have is kind of strewn all throughout the apartment. There's like, you know, one of everything, like he said. The bed is in the middle of the room for protection from spiders. And I was like, oh man, this isn't homey to me. So I think we've like settled in a little bit. But in terms of like settling, so obviously you've been here. I don't feel like I'm quite settled yet because I've been here for, you know, a week.
7 days, yeah.
Yeah, a week tonight. Do you feel like you've settled into a city of 6 million people? Because that's like 6 times the size of the biggest city you or I have ever lived in.
So I think that it's hard to perceive how big the city is just because my life is in such a small area. Mm-hmm. So I work a 15-minute walk from where I live, and I didn't have a car, so my life really extended in 1 hour's walking distance in a circle from the apartment. Yeah. Which is not that, when you look at a map of Atlantis, it's gigantic metropolis. It's like 6 times bigger than Calgary, which is the biggest city I'd ever live in, by 10 times. Yeah, so it's really hard to like notice how big, because it's like, yeah, you're kind of in an area where you're kind of trapped, I guess. Yeah. Trapped in a way like I don't ever interact with the outskirts of the city. Yeah. But the area is really lush. There's lots of trees. There's parks. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was saying to Ryan yesterday that I'm actually really surprised because people like seem to drive everywhere here. Like it's a very drivey city. I don't think that's how you say that in proper English, but I'm surprised that it's not smoggy. Like it's a really like, you can see the sky. It's clear blue. It's like pretty beautiful. It is very lush. I mean, it's still like concrete jungle, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like you're trapped into like a bunch of buildings and stuff. And we live on like a pretty quiet street as well, which is nice. Yeah, I do really miss, and I noticed the like first couple weeks I would think a lot about Canmore and like the Rocky Mountains. And over time you kind of just like stop thinking about it. But living in Canmore is pretty awesome because you have these gigantic mountains looming on all sides of the city. Mm-hmm. So it kind of like draws your attention when you're walking around town. The buildings are small, so you're kind of just noticing these like forests and mountains, and mm-hmm. you can see the stars at night. And that, I feel like it's like this difference between walking around with my head up versus like walking around kind of like my head on the sidewalk, just
like head down, just
well,
like
so that's
another person in a crowd.
That's actually not true, because one of the awesome things about Atlanta is it has like a lot of like really nice skyscrapers. So in my first couple of weeks here, I was walking around actually like with my head up, just like, oh wow, these buildings are spectacular.
That's awesome.
So I just negated everything I just said.
Yeah, it's just like looking up and seeing something different, though, I think is kind of like the point you were saying. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I miss living near mountains and living somewhere where you can feel like you're not in a city, somewhere quiet, which the area we live in is quiet, but where we were before, you could go walk. There was a mountain like in our backyard, so you could go walk into some trees and feel like a little bit lost, and it's much more peaceful feeling.
Yeah, this conversation is making me homesick. I was going to say, though, that something that's interesting about like big cities, like you were saying, how you've got kind of sort of like your hour walking radius, like all around where we live, is that it's interesting because if you went to like a different section of the city, it would have all these like different stores that would meet your basic needs. You know, like we have a grocery store nearby. We have like a health food store nearby. We've got a Starbucks. We've got, you know, a couple yoga studios. We've got a gym. We've got a Chipotle. Like if we were to live in a different area of the city, you could probably find all those exact things. It'd just be different, but also within an hour radius. So it's something that's kind of like...
It's a fractal.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, so coming from somewhere like Canmore, where it's, you know, a population of 15,000 is, you know, everyone kind of shops at the same health food store because there's only one. And, you know, most people shop at, I mean, there's two big grocery stores there. So you either shop at one or the other. There's, you know, 2 yoga studios in the whole town. You know, kind of same as right as in our neighborhood. It's just, you know, it's finding your little community close around where you live, but just in this massive city, I guess.
And that makes me think about one of the weirdest things I noticed from moving from a town that has like 5,000 people in it.
What town?
Canmore?
Oh, Canmore is 15,000 people.
No.
Really? Yeah, Banff is 5.
Moving from a smaller community to a bigger city is you get used to noticing things about people, and I'll just give you an example. So you notice like, oh, short person with like a specific type of glasses, and you see that out of your corner eye and like, oh, that's this person. And then that actually works in a small town like that. You're like, oh, there's not so many of the same looking people. So you're like, oh, you know, black curly hair, that height, oh, that's probably, no. And so you move to a big city and you constantly are like feeling like you're recognizing people. And then you're like, oh, I actually don't know anyone.
Yeah.
And it kind of gets at this. One of the things I really loved about living in a smaller city was days when you're feeling a bit lonesome or isolated, you go down to do whatever, your daily routine, and you run into people you know and you have these short conversations, but you feel seen, you feel connected to people. Whereas in a big city, you're constantly seeing people, but you don't know any of them.
Yeah, like you're pretty anonymous. Like you're just another person. You know, people don't know you, you don't know them. Whereas like if you are a part of, like for example in Canmore, like if you go to the yoga studio there, all of a sudden you'll see like all these people. So you'll see them at the health food store. You'll see them, like I worked at Lululemon. That's a brand of yoga clothing. Like, you know, it's like I constantly see people from the yoga studio, you know, at the only clothing shop where you can buy yoga clothes in the Bow Valley. So, you know, it's like you kind of just see these people who have a similar lifestyle to you when you're in a smaller town. And I'm not quite sure yet if that sort of happens in a bigger city, if you're kind of like in a community. Like, I don't know if that will start to happen kind of in this like South Buckhead area.
But I think so. The flip side of that is in a smaller town, you kind of run into people you know more often. But there's less diversity among the group of people because it is a smaller town. So you end up in relationships with people you probably have less in common with than you'd have in a city. In a city, you kind of have to go out of your way to make those connections a bit more. Mm-hmm. But since there are so many more people, you can get super specific with the type of people you interact with. For example, back in Canmore, I was thinking about trying to meet people who were also interested in Bitcoin. Found one person. We went for dinner one time. Whereas here in Atlanta, there's multiple Bitcoin meetups with hundreds of people who are joined into those meetups.
Yeah.
So you can really find people you have a ton in common with if you make the effort to go out of your way. So that's the benefit of living in a big city.
Yeah, and so in terms of like showing up in a city, and I mean, obviously you started a job, so you've got like people there that you can connect with, but you used like meetup.com as a way to meet people with similar interests as you.
Yeah, I've been to...
I was just thinking about how meetup.com sounds like a dating website. Yeah. For those of you who have never heard of meetup.com, you just look at something that you're interested in and you can become a part of a group. So it's for, any type of person. You don't have to be single to be a part of Meetup.
Yeah, and it's definitely a valuable tool for anyone moving to a new city. So go on to meetup.com, put in the city you're living in. There's a radius. You can find all sorts of different types of meetups. So I've been to Bitcoin one, Spanish conversation one. Yeah. That's the two.
That's okay though. I think that's more than I've gone to. At the same time, like being that it's such a big city, it is a little bit overwhelming going on Meetup. I think. Like I went on there like my first day here and it was just like, why are there 5,000 meetups in the city? Like, I don't know which one to go to. So, pros and cons either way. Like in Canmore, there aren't really meetups. So, I mean, there are, but not a ton. So, over the last month, do you feel like you've sort of like, are you feeling more at home here? Have you settled in?
So I've been so busy with job and learning stuff that it kind of, you just going through daily life.
So you haven't settled in, or?
No, I feel like it just happened, settling in, it happened really quickly.
Yeah.
But also haven't really spent the time to think more about how much do I like it in this city versus other places. Mm-hmm. And kind of questions like that.
Yeah.
Bigger questions.
Have you thought much about though, like something we kind of talked about before starting to record is, the value of moving. Like, are you happy to have made this transition and to have made this jump in your life?
Yeah, I felt like I had kind of gotten a bit stale being in the same place for 15 months.
Yeah, and I mean, that kind of brings up an interesting topic because 15 months isn't a very long time, think about your parents or my parents, they've lived in the same place for 30 plus years. So do you think that that's always going to be something in your life? Once a year you need to move and go to a new place, or do you think you can find that?
So I think that when you're raising kids, it's really psychologically hard on kids to move. Mm-hmm. So I don't think having a transient life is what I would want to do when I have a family.
Yeah. But up until then, do you think you'll kind of...
Yeah, we've talked a lot on this podcast before about the value in disturbing your kind of social structure.
I was thinking about stirring a massive soup pot.
Yeah, and it kind of plays into what we were talking about earlier about when you are when you're traveling, you don't really feel this pressure about having stuff because you kind of have this constant flow of new people. But then as soon as you stop, we talked about this on our episode about our Kentucky tour in Greece or our Spanish school in Buenos Aires. When you stop, you're kind of like, oh, shit, I can't just wear the same shirt 3 days in a row because people are going to notice.
Yeah.
I think when you are around the same people really often, you kind of have this kind of psychological need to fit in, that you're going to care about what those people think about you, and you're going to worry about being judged. And obviously there's a spectrum of where it's healthy in that versus where you want to be, but I think at some level you're always going to be worried about what those people think of you.
Yeah, I think it's pretty like innately human to, you know, think about what other people are thinking about you, because people are always thinking. Like, internal dialogue is going 100% of the time, and it's like always this like, oh, I wonder what they're thinking about, you know, what I'm wearing today or what I did with my hair, or...
Yeah, and you're picking up on all these social cues. So the point I was getting at is that when you're introduced to new people, they kind of come to know you as you are. And then if you start to diverge from that, or maybe, you know, people at work think of you as quiet, and then one day you come in and you feel more expressive, you feel more energized, people are going to look at you like, oh, what's going on? What's going on today? You're strange. And the kind of message you can pick up from that is like, oh, you know, I need to be consistent about who I am. You don't really have this room to be high energy and low energy. People want consistency out of everyone in their life. They want like black and white. Oh, this person is like that.
Yeah.
So when you have the same group of friends, I think that when you're in the same group of friends, like every single weekend you're seeing the same people, you're hanging out, that can kind of become like a trap. You don't really have the room to grow. Whereas you move to a new city, you meet new people, they have no expectations of what you are like or not, or what you are like or what you aren't like. So you can they come to see you as you are in that moment, not as you were 5 years ago. Yeah,
which is like pretty cool.
So that's when I think the value in moving to a new city and setting up a new social circle is that it allows you room to change and grow.
Yeah. And we've talked about that a lot, how that's one of the benefits of traveling, but it's also a benefit of, you know, moving to a new city. Something too that's like, so when you're traveling, you're kind of like, especially if you're in hostels or you're on tours, like you're kind of put in social situations. And when you move to a new city where you don't know people, you kind of have to put yourself in social situations to meet people. So I think that's one thing that's different about moving, and something also that like I'm struggling a little bit with in, you know, my first week of being here, because I've actually never socialized myself in a situation where I haven't been put in a social group, because from the time that I was very small, I was put in school, so I had people around me, and then from school I went to university, and from university I went to work, and from work I went to like, you know, other jobs, and then in between those jobs I traveled, and there was people constantly there. So it's like all of a sudden I show up in this new city and I don't have a job, I'm not going to school. So then it's like, how do I socialize myself? Do you know what I mean? Like it's a good way to kind of like, you know, put yourself out of your comfort zone and really challenge yourself as a person and learn and grow as to what you want in friends and who you want to socialize yourself with, I think.
So how has your first week been in terms of trying to create a social network without structure?
Well, I haven't made a friend, so I don't know how it's going. No, it's been good. Like it's been a bit of a challenge for me. This is the furthest I've ever lived away from home, and despite traveling a lot, like I said before, like traveling is kind of like, you know, even when you're on your own, like even when I traveled by myself, it's like, it's so easy to meet friends when you go and you travel and you stay at a place and you do a yoga teacher training program with 30 people. Like, I'm friendly, I'm nice, I'm pretty personable, and I generally like meeting people. So, you know, it was pretty easy for me to make friends in that situation. I mean, it's been good. Like, I found a yoga studio nearby that I really like, and I've had some good social interactions there. I've tried out a bar studio, and I haven't had too many social interactions there, but it seems like the same people go to the same classes at times. So I think if I made that a consistent thing, I could definitely meet some people there.
But how does it feel to be in this kind of like transition period where you're still like really uncertain about if you're going to build a social support network?
Yeah, I mean, it's scary. I think moving from, you know, my hometown of Cochrane to Calgary, it was only like 30 minutes away. So I had a pretty good like safety blanket of my family. And then moving to Canmore, it was still like, okay, well, if I don't make friends, like, you know, my group of best girlfriends is only like an hour away. So I feel like I've had these like pretty like good safety blankets like for me. And here it's like I don't really have anything like that. It's a little bit lonely, especially too coming from a job where I was surrounded by, you know, I was on a staff of 25 people and I worked in retail. So I interacted with hundreds of different people every day. And now, you know, working from home is like I interact with you in the morning, and then, you know, I go and I do some form of exercise. So maybe I interact with like a small group of people, and then I go to a coffee shop, and it's still like, it's these smaller interactions. And it's definitely like, it's calming in a way, but it also is a little bit lonely just because of what I'm used to. But I think it's just a transition. You know, I think that humans are innately adaptable to whatever their surroundings are. And I think we are social creatures. I don't think that if I just stayed in the house all day and didn't talk to anyone, I would be happy. But at the same time, I think right now I'm just adjusting to, you know, going from interacting with hundreds of people in a day to way less than that. And just finding some like comfort in the discomfort, I guess.
Yeah, something I've struggled with is recognizing loneliness and going about the finding ways to solve it in the correct way.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm prone to distraction. So sometimes instead of realizing, oh, you know what, I feel really lonely right now, and you're just on your computer more than you normally would. You're on Facebook,
mm-hmm.
like browsing around and trying to connect with people on Facebook instead of realizing that, oh, what you really need to do is take some initiative and try to build relationships with people.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Because that's something that I was looking for, and something that made me feel ready to move, was that made lots of friends in Canmore. But I did feel like a little bit not at home there.
Really? What made you feel not
Well, just a
home?
bit isolated in that I didn't. I didn't connect with people who shared. Obviously there was quite a few people, but didn't really make like really strong bonds with anyone who.
It's like like-minded.
Yeah, like really shared my same values.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's cool. I knew that. I just wasn't sure what you were referring to as not feeling at home. Yeah, I think something for me that you were kind of talking about before is like missing the mountains in your first few weeks is like, I'm definitely in that place right now. We're going to go out and get into nature this afternoon, so I'm pretty excited about that, to hang out in the trees. And not in the city. We went to a mall yesterday and like it was pretty like hectically overwhelming. And I think part of that is coming from like a smaller place and adjusting to a bigger place where there's people everywhere and a lot of like noise and chaos and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. But I think I think it's good to have this change injected into at least my life.
Yeah.
To go from a small city to a big city, so that if I go back to a small city, I'll appreciate that more, because you stop noticing things.
Yeah.
And so to go from a city where there isn't much going on to a city like this where there's so many possibilities of things to do.
Yeah.
And to really be able to like soak that in and appreciate that. And then when it comes time to move on to something else, to be ready for that other thing.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with that. I think as much as I miss Canmore right now, I think there was a point where, you know, I stopped recognizing how beautiful Cascade Mountain was as I was driving from Canmore to Banff, and I was like, okay, you know, when you stop recognizing how like blindingly beautiful your surroundings are when you live in a national park like Banff National Park, I think it's time to, you know, go and then come back so you can recognize exactly how like amazing it is to be able to live somewhere like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes me think about something we've talked about quite a bit over past episodes, is really choosing to live where you live. Mm-hmm. Not just kind of rolling into it because that's where I've always been.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you make a choice to go somewhere and you end up being like, oh, maybe that could have been a different choice that would have made me feel happier. But I think it's always better to act and then to know instead of to stay and then to be wondering what that would have been like. So whether that's you living in your city, wanting to go traveling and never really like settling on one place. I know when I was thinking about taking a solo trip, I was like, I could go here, I could go here, I could go here. There's infinite options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talked about that quite a bit before and like the pre-trip episode before you left.
Yeah, or whether that's you're in the U.S. and you keep hearing cool things about Austin or Silicon Valley or San Francisco or whatever. And you're like, oh, you know, it sounds really cool over there. There's something that, like, when I hear about it, something that appeals to me, something maybe like a sense of freedom that you would feel by going somewhere new. Like a sense of excitement. Like this feeling of like, oh, maybe there's something more somewhere else. If that's living in another country, living in another city. So I think taking action to do it is always a good thing. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I'm still really in this like transition period where like we had these two options, working in going to Central America or going to Atlanta. And you're like, oh, how is this going to play out long term? I don't know how I'll feel about it in 9 months, but
or like 5 years.
Yeah, or how it's affected the entire course of my life by choosing to make a decision. But
yeah, and it's something that I thought about a lot on my road trip since I was by myself. As I was like, I can't believe I'm driving my car down to Atlanta, Georgia, to, you know, try and like, you know, just work remotely and like, you know, make it on my own, you know, like not having a job and not being able to get a job in the United States it's kind of a scary thing. And as I was driving, I was like, is this the right decision? Am I, you know, making the right decision? But it's something that you don't know. Like, there's no way. Like, I could still be in Canmore and I'd still be wondering. Like, I'm just, you know, you don't know. You kind of just have to take a leap of faith and dive in and just, you know, make a choice and learn from whatever happens with that choice. I guess it's the only thing you can do. Mm-hmm. Do you have anything else to say about living in the ATL?
No, so we've got lots of stuff coming up. We're going to be podcasting regularly, hopefully bringing on some people who've got some really cool stories and experiences, blogging on theworldwanderers.com. And so we'd love for you to interact with us on our Facebook page or on the website.
Twitter. Send us an email.
Yeah, anywhere you're at, we're probably there. We love to get to know people who are listening to the podcast. It always makes my day when I see someone sending a comment in that something we're saying is resonating with them or it's been helpful to them. We'll keep you updated on how things are going in our American adventure.
Yeah. And as always, thanks for listening. Check out the show notes at www.theworldwanders.com. And you can find us at The World Wanders. Just, Google that stuff and it'll be there. Okay, bye.
Adios.